Yat damn! It has been a
Whoa!
minute since we did one of these things. Well, you've been busy, Nico, with the boys club and all that stuff. But me myself, I have been in hiatus. I have been hibernating. I have been power training, as those weebs say. And by that, I mean I've been crashing out professionally because everything is awful. What's going on with you guys?
Also, crashing out, not as professionally as you, but just crashing
Hmm.
out.
Hmm.
Because at the general state of the world, gestures to generally towards everything.
Hmm. Looks out the window, cries. It's it's been a long fucking year, and it's only April.
For real.
um,
I feel like 5 years passed in the last month.
I have aged so much. Like it's really bad. Like everything hurts mentally, physically, emotionally. And I was just referencing um before we started the pod. So I'm just saying this for what's the word? Not brevity. Oh goodness gracious, I forget. It's this word people use when they're trying to basically timestamp something, but I don't remember. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is I
Doing
guess
great.
the date this episode. We're essentially here in the Imperial Core on the verge of constitutional crisis. So obviously we haven't been covering news because we haven't been doing the show lately. Hence my crash out. But basically for those who don't know, there is a United States man named Abraham Garcia who was kidnapped by the Department of Justice, kidnapped by ICE, and deported for allegedly being a member of MS-13. And turns out that person has nothing to do with MS-13, as his wife and
Shocker.
family and his legal representatives have discovered. They sent him to the, I'm going to pronounce it wrong as I always do, but they sent him to the mega prison. I'm just going to say COCOT out in El Salvador, where the Salvadorian government is essentially renting out its space for people to put prisoners in. It's some real dystopian, I remember there's a scene in freaking Mass Effect, the video game series, in the second game where you go to a space prison where the prison is run
Mm-hmm.
by a gang and they literally just pay them to hold people there. That's essentially what's happening. Now, the Supreme Court of the United States, which remember is in Donald Trump's favor, just just said that the Trump administration has to bring him back. But the Trump administration is refusing to and also cannot give the whereabouts of where he is. So the speculation right now is that he's dead. And they're basically covering it up.
Mm-hmm.
But if he's dead and or is alive and they're just not bringing him back, now we're at an impasse because the Supreme Court, which is arguably supposed to be the law of the land, or the supreme power, is telling the president, "Hey, you have to do this," and if he doesn't do it, then we're at a historic constitutional crisis. And things are just looking up for the empire, wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah, it's all roses, no
It's a
issues
great day to be an
whatsoever.
empire.
Man,
Mm-hmm.
I am so happy to be directly right here at this moment of history.
Mm-hmm. Me too. Invest in Tesla. Now, some would say that this is the time of the second coming. And I know you know a little bit about that, Cruz.
Oh
So
yeah.
in this episode where we're going to talk about work, can you please just give us your crash course in experience and what happens when you as an individual decide to take up the system alone without the backing, without the people?
So I want to start. Let me start by saying there is a tendency when people are introduced to radical ideas, revolutionary ideas, where they get very excited. I feel like even if you take it outside of political ideology, just about anything, when you start something new, there's an initial spark. You get very, very excited to do this thing, and you're like, why hasn't this happened yet? This makes so much sense. It it should be happening now. We could absolutely do it now. Look how quickly I learned when I was just introduced to the idea. I was just introduced to this person, to this thing, to this item. Everyone else could be convinced that quickly, especially if they have a strong figurehead at the center. Sometimes that's what goes through people's heads.
Mm-hmm.
And that line of thinking I would call over radicalization, because in my own personal work experience, I may have over radicalized someone that should not have been radicalized. We're going to refer
Go
to him
on.
as Jesus,
Mm-hmm.
because that's how he referred to himself, was Jesus. And no, this is not his name. This is not even remotely his name. He just thinks he is Christ incarnate. And I told him about some stuff going on at my workplace. For those that don't know, I work within the library system of a city. And he asked what the next steps were. And I introduced him to some basic concepts, like the title of this video, What is Work? And sort of going through the history of work and what work looks like under our capitalist system and what it could look like under a socialist system. And then talking about like what, say, the USSR did and Cuba and various other groups, and largely talking about a societal level.
Mm-hmm.
And then saying like, well, how can you improve your personal workplace? There's things like unions and collective bargaining, right? He decided he was going to bypass all of that.
As one does.
He can just go straight to the oppressor themselves and say, you're going to listen to me. You're going to do as I say, because I am Christ.
Yeah.
And he asked me, what do I think the next steps are? And as a man who follows socialist ideology, I said, you need to talk to your fellow coworkers. Talk
as you do.
Talk to everyone else, see the demands, see what they want, see what's bothering them, and offer support in any way you can. Especially you need to see what they have already tried and what they've already done. Because one, you don't want to repeat the same actions. Because if it didn't work before, it's not going to work a second time, right? And he said, no, I don't have time to talk to everyone. We need to do this now, and if I get fired, I get fired. So what happens when someone gets over radicalized and tries to spontaneously take action for themselves, especially if they have, in this case, a messiah complex? You get fired.
You don't say.
And not only does the revolution not succeed, but now the fellow coworkers are like, oh, he went up and challenged them directly and lost his job. I don't want to lose my job. So if anything, we're now a step back, because these people that were already on the fence about doing something are now on the other side of it.
Mm-hmm. Right, because this is what happens when you don't have a strategy, when you're literally not organized. I mean, we say that word all the time, but that's truly what it comes down to. When you're not organized, when you're not in flow with your cadre, your party, your comrades, your coworkers, your union, you're gonna overshoot, and it's gonna backfire, and you're only damaging the greater movement. So I just wanted to kind of hear your.
It's an interesting story,
but like.
Obviously, there's a lot of details I'm not going to share here.
Right.
But continue.
Exactly. What's up, big dog Ash? What's going on? Yeah, anyway, so we just wanted to talk today about I don't know why I thought, like, in my head I was like, she'll respond, but you're down there. And we're up here. And we're better than you. But
damn.
Anyways, I'm just kidding, dude. I'm not Jesus. Anyway, so we wanted to talk about work today because we're always talking about what you just mentioned: radicalizing in the workplace, organizing in the workplace, unionizing. But like, really, what is the thing that we do? We talk about labor, we talk about work, but I feel like we never really kind of really break it down in simple terms. And kind of discuss how the relationship of work and labor has changed from basically the beginning of human society to where we were in the in sort of like the Industrial Revolution to the Russian Revolution to basically where we are today and where we could go with it. I think it would be something pretty interesting to talk about. One of the main things that anti-communists always bring up to us communists, as you can definitely attest to, Ash, in the TikTok live debate scene, is that communists don't want to work and communists are lazy. But really, it's quite the opposite. Not even just, to defend people who share the same ideology and who believe in the same science as me, but human beings have only gotten into the position that they're in as a species because of work, because of our ability to quite literally use energy, to use physics to get stuff done, to mobilize human activity into organization. Our labor power. I would say it's one of the main things that separates us a lot from different animals in an evolutionary sense of how we were able to basically get to the position that we are. I don't know why I'm thinking about the seals clubbing incident, but I was thinking about how like beavers build dams, and my head immediately went to what if a bunch of beavers got organized and could build a bunch of dams, and I was like, well, yeah, then they would probably take over the world. But anyway, so yeah,
beaver supremacy.
They say that the first signs of human civilization either come from like Margaret Mead's example of human beings taking care of the disabled, or all the way something to like the building of Jericho, sort of the first human city, if we were to kind of put more of like a little bit more of a concrete historical example. All these things that took human beings to be able to do stuff like that in order to put string, twine around a stick, all the way to erecting, walls to protect your village at night, to taking care of people who can't take care of themselves. Child rearing are all things that require human input and energy and labor, and it's all work. That's how we got here to begin with. And it's really only within the last, I would say, probably 2000, no, not 2000 years, within the last 1,000 years that it really began to change. And then within the last 500 years that it started to be sort of shape into how we are sort of forced to work and labor now, versus the last 100 years where things have ultimately changed on a pretty dramatic level. There's a video, and I forget what their YouTube is called, and you probably know it, Cruz.
The Historia Civilis, I believe, is the channel.
Yes, sir.
Which, if people remember, that one came out like a little over a year ago, probably at this point. And it goes into the history of work. I believe in that video, they specifically say, they give a specific date as to when work changed, as 1664. Because that's when the big capitalists really started kind of taking control and taking us from that feudal structure to the capitalist structure.
Yeah, I believe the example, and I could be wrong. I just watched the video this morning, but I believe the example that they basically use within the 1664, let's say that, or 1662, was essentially God, I hope I'm not getting the examples mixed up, but basically a church was paid to basically ring its bell at the start and stop of the workday, and that effectively changed the entire relationship of work and labor for people back in England, because now fundamentally there is quite literally a dominating feature of the town or cityscape of your time and your day is dedicated to this work and this labor. Because as the video points out, and as we know, just examining history and human culture, that human beings never really worked in the way that they do back in 1662 or 64 or whatever, and today the way that they used to. So humans generally have operated doing things in very relaxed and short bursts of time. You have to
Short bursts
remember,
unless absolutely needed, right? Like in terms
Mhm.
of like disasters or harvest seasons and things like that. People had a very relaxed pace, usually in like 30-minute chunks, is what I believe the video does.
yeah, and people generally you have to keep in mind that capitalism as an ideology is so pervasive that it quite literally fundamentally tries to manipulate the physical world and reality around us, and they do that successfully, with the concept of time. As human animals, we live on earth, and we've always, for the most part of our existence, have lived in a realm where our time was dictated by space, by
Mhm.
the rotation of the earth, of the rise and fall of the sun, um, day and night. And human beings found themselves very naturally operating in these cycles of time where you didn't necessarily have to worry. You didn't worry about, oh, it's 8:15. You worried, is there light outside? Is it warm? Is it too warm? Is it too hot? Is it too cold? For me to
Do I
be able
want
to
to
do
work? Do I have
right.
to work?
Mhm. Am I hungry? Yeah. But with the invention of electric light, and this isn't by no means trying to say, like, I'm not trying to do some anarcho primivist shit where I'm like, oh, down with
Anarcho
electric light,
primitivism.
thank you. Where I'm not trying to be like, oh, let's get rid of technology, not at all. But what I'm saying is, we can see how capitalism and capitalists saw things like the invention of steam and electric light, and we're basically like, how can we keep these people working through all hours of the night? And that's
And
what they did.
I was going to say more specifically in the case of that video, because like steam, electric power, like you said, all that, but more importantly, it was the clock, the mechanical
Mm-hmm.
clock that they were able to
Mhm.
manipulate, tied to the production line and things like that. And something that was at once just dictated by the sun or maybe the church bells ringing, right, was now suddenly dictated by this clock. And the capitalists would manipulate time and the way we do, like, think about how stressed out we get today. And this has happened for the last like 400 years now, where it's like if you're a minute late to work, depending on your boss, that could be it.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. I'd be walking into work whenever, though, if I'm being super honest. But that's also because I'm woke and big brained. But when my main job, they switched their clock-in system. They started talking about how there's no more 7-minute grace period. And for people who might not know, it's basically like your time clock gets rounded down to the nearest 15th of a minute.
Mhm.
It's just easier for them to calculate your time that way. And my boss was basically saying, like, yep, that's not a thing anymore. And I remember I was like, at the time when she mentioned that, I was like, isn't that like a labor law? And she was like, no, it's not, which it's not. But nobody at work's doing it. Everyone,
So
yeah.
I want to sidestep
Mm-hmm.
because like in that video, something similar happened when they introduced the bell and the clock, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you remember what happened, people were like, "The fuck is that?" I'm just going to ignore it because it's never mattered before.
Yeah,
And it would
exactly.
just keep going to work the same way, and that's what was driving the capitalists nuts.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that attitude has persisted. That's just a general like, what are
Mhm.
you talking about?
Yeah, because the people at the time, people now, and people back then, recognize, well, I have to go to work because I have to get a wage in order to pay for food and shelter and these kind of things. So at some point, I'm going to show up. You know what I mean? And people
Mhm.
weren't dumb. People were aware if I don't show up at all, I'm probably going to lose my job. But people still arrived and showed up and did what they were supposed to do. Um, but capitalism is the ideology of trying to usurp as much power as possible from the people that make up society, that they want to control every aspect of your life, including what you're not when you're not working for them.
Your
But
personal life.
me and you have been yapping for a second. You have any comments, Nico Relli?
No, I was going to say, when you talk about the invention of the clock, the first thing I think of is the fact that during like feudal societies, the way we slept was completely different.
Yeah.
We used to do segmented sleeping where we would sleep for like 4 or 5 hours, get like a REM cycle in, wake up, go and do things, usually hang out with your family, and then go back to sleep and sleep for another 4 or 5 hours. And because of the work shift and the clock, we've completely changed that. And then you're wondering why people are, I mean, of course, outside of doing continuous work, always tired because we've kind of adjusted how we're forced to sleep.
Mm.
Yeah, our sleep schedules are based around the 8-hour workday. Right? 8 hours of sleep, 8 hours of work, 8 hours of personal time. And I think it was like like you said, 4 or 5 hours of sleep in the past. You'd wake up, go for a walk, hang out. I think nowadays people would probably play a video game or something. So you wake up, you watch a movie, you go back to sleep. Then wake up for work.
One of the interesting things they brought up in that video, and going back to the concept of the clock, they were talking about how people started carrying pocket watches around with them, because now all of a sudden their literal time on Earth is being accounted for in such a way. And they didn't mention this part in particular, but it got me thinking about who were the kind of people who really could, at least especially in the beginning, who could afford to have like a clock in their home or have a pocket watch. You know what I mean? Like we're already starting to see like the formation of class disparity within already a segmented proletariat, where now different aspects of people at the time now had access to time, while other workers didn't. And it reminds me sort of like today, even though generally even really poor people have some kind of cell phone, it reminds me of the cell phone or the smartphone now, where every sort of aspect of our life is still geared towards the concept of work, when we're going to work, or money, or purchasing, or commodities.
It's a literal pocket watch again.
Yeah. Even having how many people's alarms on their phones are set for something relating to work, going to work, waking up for work, getting up to take your medications to go to work, to catch the bus, the train, the car, whatever. It's always geared towards this concept of putting in work for people who are just simply taking advantage of you. And it's so interesting, right? Because we as human beings, as I said before, we're always working in community and working within reasonable timeframes to get stuff done. And for the majority of our existence, we have. But all of a sudden, with the introduction of work becoming this thing where it's simply at the service of somebody else, where this is, I mean, it really, what I'm trying to say is it just goes back to Marx's concept of alienation, of being depersonalized from your own life and your own tasks and your family and your friends and other caretaking responsibilities that people historically have found themselves in, are now pulled away from these things. I mean, even our own podcast, how many people have told us, like, I usually watch your stuff, like after the fact, as opposed to, when you guys are up, because I'm working or I'm taking care of children, or, what have you.
Yeah. And then on top of that, there's also that pervasive feeling of competition with your fellow worker. Like you are always in competition, even with your immediate coworker, which is another reason it can be so hard to get kind of cooperative collective action going, because you're like, oh, well, if I get fired, they're just going to hire someone else.
Yeah, and it makes me think too about like how in our societies today, right, where we don't have a third place generally, that for a lot of people work becomes sort of a hybrid of a third place, in the sense of like, I mean, I see it a lot in the medical field, a lot of drama, a lot of pettiness, relationships, bullying and stuff like that, because people are so tied to work as their identity, as their social club, that other aspects that you traditionally would have found outside of the workplace are bleeding into the workplace. And from from it sounds like from the video that we were talking about earlier, um, it sounds like for the most part when people went to work, um, while they got their job done, there was a lot of dilly dallying and a lot of chat, but there wasn't a lot of problems. And people would just be like, "All right, let's get out of here. I don't want to be
Yeah.
here."
Show up, do your work, get the job done, go home,
Mm-hmm.
and then go to the town square, go to the tavern, things like
Yeah.
that. It's something I just thought about, and I don't want to lose the thought.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like, if you think about cozy gaming, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just the kind of tangent.
Sure.
I think about like Stardew Valley.
Mm-hmm.
Have either of you played that?
Yeah.
I feel like Nico should play Stardew Valley. But what happens at the end of the day, right? Like, you kind of finish your chores and all the townspeople finish their chores. Where do they go? They meet up at the tavern, the town
Mm-hmm.
square. They all hang out. They do that. And that's just how society was for centuries. And a lot of people will play those games and be like, man, this is how this would be such a cozy life. It's like, that's the life that we had. That's what was effectively taken from us.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, exactly. But now if you just pay the low price of $500 for the Switch 2, you too can play Stardew Valley and maybe feel a macodium of
You can play
social
Cozy
human
Simulator.
interaction. What?
You can play Cozy Simulator, and you work as much or as little as you want, or as little as you need. You get what you get what you need and provide for the society as a whole. And then you go around, you go on little adventures with your friends.
Yeah. No,
Drink
exactly.
some beer.
This has got me thinking of like the opposite, like the really strong spike in like simulation games where literally the simulation is just you working. Like, grocery store
Yeah.
simulation,
Pressure washer simulator.
pressure washer
simulator.
simulator, TCG card game store simulator, like all of these things. Like, I'm like, why do you want to go home and simulate you working?
I do like the truck simulators and like flight simulators and stuff like that, where it's just like you're doing it. You're on a long haul drive for 8 hours. Me, an Uber driver, going home and just like, I guess I'll drive some more because that's what my brain is stuck on now.
Yeah,
this is my core identity.
Yeah, and it probably has a lot to do with people trying to find like the path of least resistance to feeling not guilty for when they take leisure time. So, it's like, well, I guess I'll just do some more menial labor on my virtual machine. It's only a matter of time until they start paying people to play Truck Simulator or something like that. So people go to their other job and they're just playing games.
That happen?
What happened?
I feel like there's a website where that does happen.
Well, yeah.
Well, Twitch.
Well, I know, but I meant more. I didn't mean so much of you getting paid, but for other people to watch you do it. I meant more like the game is straight up paying you to play the game. But I understand what you're saying. Yeah, because we do. I mean, what are we doing right now? We're yapping, right? And people now and in the future will come to watch this yap session. I mean, how many people put on podcasts just to feel like there's people talking in their house? I mean, I've done it. I do it all the time.
I've done that with Twitch streams. Like, I don't even watch the stream half the time. Like, I'll be cleaning or just sitting there and I just want to feel like someone's around.
It's because we're all intrinsically lonely. Now,
because of capitalism.
Yes, sir.
Right.
Now, so kind of bringing back around to the communist bit, right? So, like, people talk about how, or anti-communists will say, well, in the USSR, you had no choice. But there was also no jobs, but there was also full employment, but there was also unemployment. So I found a few things I wanted to share. Two of them are from the same source. So let me pull them up. So this is coming from, let me see here. I have not done this in so long.
I'm also going to send you something that I had found.
Okay,
for
baby girl.
future. While you pull that up,
Mm.
Nico, do you have any little comments or anecdotes?
Oh, I was just going to talk about how one of my major issues that I personally experience in my own work sphere is that alienation, and especially with this idea of this rise of like male loneliness, how many male coworkers see their female coworkers as their dating pool.
Oh yeah,
It
Yeah.
happens
absolutely.
all the time.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'll be the first person to admit it. Like most of my life has been that way, where
Mhm.
I've ended up in relationships or dating people who I worked with because, um, one, probably because of my own misogyny, but two, when you don't have a third place to meet people, you meet people who are in proximity to you.
Yeah. And
Hmm.
if the only people you interact with are at work, you're gonna probably end up trying to go for someone at work. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's the unfortunate
Absolutely.
reality of that.
Absolutely. So I wanted to share this. So this is Myra Page, Soviet Main Street, Cooperative Publishing Society of Foreign Workers, USSR, in 1933. So this is from firsthand accounts over at the Marxist Archive online. And I wanted to talk about these two things you can see here highlighted in this first person perspective at a factory election and when labor runs the works. Now, I'm going to be doing a lot of yapping and I'm going to go kind of quick just because it is a lot of yapping. But basically, this is some firsthand accounts of how work was structured in the Soviet Union, including negative aspects. So this is not just like a full blown like only good things that we share here in our propaganda. So at the factory election, this is a big day in the Poldosk machine plant. For several weeks, flaming banners stretched along factory and club walls, hanging from rafters above the machines, have called all out on the trade union's election. 11,000 workers in their section and department meeting have thrashed out their union's work and leadership. This past year, written up their suggestions for their wall newspapers, drawn up their plans, and finally chosen and instructed their delegates in today's conference, where the annual elections of the factory committee will take place. The factory band plays revolutionary airs at the delegates, 642 in all, gradually fill the ground floor of this club's auditorium. Walls and stacks are hung with banners, and the galleries are several hundred who have come to listen to the proceedings. Now, you tell me, you point to me, a unionized place in the United States that has that kind of energy. Our old friend Andrei Budnov is one of the delegates from the foundry. We spied Jack's red head among the youth. There are many familiar faces among the masses listening with dose attention to the report of the trade union secretary, Comrade Volkov. No one interrupts him, yet it is clear that his listeners are not satisfied with his report. True, there have been several successes during the last 12 months, like the opening of a new foundry, the building of apartments and barracks in new workers' town, and completion of the factory large dining hall, which will serve, when running at full capacity, some 25,000 hot meals a day. But why does Bolov dwell on this? What does the other side, the tasks that still lie ahead? Surely he knows that things are not going as they should with the production of number 31, the new industrial type of sewing machine, that many union members are behind in their dues, clamoring for more nurseries, and the union committee in some departments have gone to sleep on the job. Why doesn't he practice more self-criticism, bring forth his proposals on how to meet the problems of the uppermost now in every worker's mind? Well, Volkov is a good fellow and has done his best. His job has proven too big for him. It is clear he must go back to his machine, and another worker more fitted for his post is to be chosen. There are other reports and greetings from the chairman of the regional metal union in Poldosk local, from the factory committee's control commission on the audit of union books. Comrade Clemenson takes the platform as delegates set in a solid frame. Clothed in his familiar khaki outfit with belted jacket and high boots, his black eyes alert, gleaming at them, they lean forward. This is going to be more like Clemenson's hardworking, capable secretary of the factory's units of the Communist Party, has the confidence of every workers, both party and non-party. He speaks quietly, yet his voice carries easily to the farthest corner. Comrades, we have come here to practice real Bolshevik self-criticism of ourselves and our union work this last year, and to find the means of doing better work in the next. One after another, he takes up problems, making his points in a direct manner. Soon he comes to production. In our struggle to master technique to take place, our plant on a 100% efficiency basis, we've made much progress. Is it enough? Only about 60% of the plant has gone over to the new wage system. And what about the quality of products? Yet we know every sewing machine we turn out is propaganda weapon for us, for socialism, good or bad. When a machine works well, the village woman using it says, "Aye, there's good workers for you. We'll have to match them." When a machine works badly, breaks down, soon though, through some fault in its make, but then the peasants say, "Yes, you'll tell us to do our work on the collective farm, as well as the factory workers." What sort of examples have they set? This strikes home in his report to his department. Each delegate will repeat this to his fellows. We want better and more products from the farms. It's up to us to furnish them with more and more better machines. And that way, everybody's living goes up. It's up to us, the workers, to show the peasants in practice how to build. Ivan Simonov, a small, weary man, speaks with animation. This is direct workers' criticism I'm going to make straight from the bench. In our department, organized a short time ago, where number 31 is produced, things are far from good. We're short of materials and measuring instruments. We lack enough skilled hands. Above all, the work is poorly organized. This must be changed. Everybody knows these industrial machines, it means production, are our most important. Why should women stay at home sewing on foot machines when we can free them for industry, develop more clothing factories, and meet the demand for machine-made clothes? Workers on number 31 want to turn out Bolshevik machines without defects and our full quota. We say to the union party and the factory admin, see that we help necessary to do. Then you'll find what can be done. So I'm gonna come back to the stream over here for a second. So basically, what's happening, and mind you, sometimes when these things get translated to English, they can be a little jarbled. But basically, what's happening here in this in Soviet Main Street is that there's two Americans, women who have gone over to the Soviet Union, and they're basically just experiencing things. So here they're at a trade union election where the workers are openly discussing things that have not worked out well and things that they think will work out when it comes to electing their new representative. The point I'm bringing up here is, and you both can attest to this too, but like when I think about my job and I think about organizing there, because I went from a union job to a non-union job, to even in a union, when you have a union, even to get enough people in that union, to get enough people in the United States to even get in a room and be this enthusiastic about like, hey, why don't we just get together and figure this stuff out, is nigh impossible. And it's impossible because of the alienation that people feel. People are scared to lose their jobs. People don't feel like their voices are going to be heard anyway. So even in this situation where, there are negative things to bring up, this is workplace democracy happening. And we don't have that here we have not had that here ever.
And the counter to this, or like the effect of not having this, is you get Jesus to go tackle management on their own. Like that's what happens.
I want to highlight this line down here. On the way home, we two Americans agree that this has been a real experience for us in working class democracy. Certainly unlike any AFL union meeting or convention had ever taken part in. And then the fakers had always put the lid on discussion, railroaded through their slate, and tried to browbeat or throw out any who dared to criticize or bring forward good programs. Absolutely. And I think that's just super important to highlight, because while I think it will be a very long time until humans are really able to start to move away from sort of being identified with what they do in terms of like a wage. When you're in a situation where the workers are quite literally owning their means of their own production, you're going to have people who are going to be naturally more invested in improving their workplace. And utilizing their labor correctly. I mean, these people had a band, for Christ's sakes. When was a band at your job? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I think it's.
I was gonna say I run a sound studio, so like.
I don't know. You're one.
Yeah, I'm about to say where I work also, but.
So
okay,
not the
guys.
best examples.
Get your point.
My band is my headphone.
This is sort of the difference, like kind of with that line at the end there about like American unions versus this. The difference is, like a lot of American unions or unions within capitalist societies are more or less stuck begging for bigger slices of the pie.
Right.
This is an example of what happens when the workers actually own the oven.
Exactly. You mean I could own the oven instead of them just telling me I get a pizza party?
Yeah, you get the easy bake oven, and then you can have a pizza party every day.
You own the pizza.
Yeah.
You own the
I own
pizza
the pizza.
and the workplace in which you have the party.
Absolutely. You have any comments on that, Nico, before I move on?
That's pretty much it. Pizza party.
All right.
Life is a pizza party.
This is the next section right after when labor runs the works. We spent days with Lacken going over the plant. Amid the drums of machines, the alert figures of men and women, shocked brigadiers tending their lathes, Alex's young face suddenly flashes before us, his cap cocked to one side and a notebook bulging out of his overall pocket. He's swinging along with such gusto that we josh him. Say, you act like you're the boss of this place. In the States, this will hold a bitter sting. Here in the Soviet Union, it carries a different meaning. Alex answers us, and so I am, one of its 11,000 masters. He pulls out his notebook. Look, Jack, here's how our Cosmo brigades are fulfilling their plans. Listen here, Jack. I was thinking Joe Biden. You know that our bureau gave me the job of checking up. No such a bad record, eh? We go over the figures. Pretty good, Jack says. Tinker, you have to do it, eh? Adding quickly, but the percentage of damage is still too high. That's right, Alex agrees. They'll be the main point of our next brigade meeting. Well, so long. See you at the commune tonight. And this was one of the 11,000 masters is off to assemble department notebooks in hand. How is the labor control of industry organized? In accordance with the principles of one-man management, the director of the plant-in-chief. He is appointed by the state trust in agreement with the party and the trade union, and to him, the managers of the various shops, departments, etc., are subordinate. But general coordination is secured by what is known as a triangle, consisting of the director, the secretary of the party nucleus, and the chairman of the trade union committee. The triangle coordinates the work of the management. The party and the trade union organize for the most effective running of the plant, for the organization of production, and the mobilization of masses for work. Also, questions affecting the material conditions of the workers. The triangle at this factory consists of Nicholas Varin, the director, Sergeyev, chairman of the union committee, and Clemenson, the secretary of the party committee. Basically, what they're saying is that that sort of the chief of the workplace is appointed by the state, but also approved by the trade union. That is, the people working at the place. Every department.
And if the trade union doesn't approve, then that person doesn't get into the position. I think, just to really hammer that home.
Yeah. Every department also has its own triangle composed of its elected union and the party secretary and a department manager appointed by the admin. If the workers of any department should find their manager unsatisfactory, there is an investigation and matters are corrected. If found necessary, the foreman is removed. As a matter of fact, Vernon's predecessor was taken from his post because of the inability to organize production so that the plant could fulfill its plan. And keep in mind, this is the plan set by the factories. Keep in mind.
Mm-hmm.
The main concern of the union, which embraces 98% of all employed at the plant, is to assist production by mobilizing the masses, by fighting for labor discipline and socialist attitude towards labor, by raising the cultural level of workness and locking out the advancement of their working level conditions. The Communist Party supervises the work and sees it into the general line of the proletariat dictatorship. It is carried out. Its members, together with the Cosmos form over a third of the party's synonym and role. From over one third of factory workers. The party is often misrepresented by a hostile press as a dictator. When Russian workers hear of this, they are amazed resentfully. Those who say such things are either ignoramuses or deliberately misrepresenting things. Fyodor says in our country, power. I was just thinking of calling somebody on TikTok an ignoramus. Powers of governing is in the hands of no one group or organization, but in the hands of a class. That is us, the workers. The party does not dictate the working class. It carries out the will of the working class. It is the flesh of our flesh made up of the best from among us. Andre's eyes narrow. Here's the point which the other side tries to hide. As long as classes exist, one or the other will rule. That is plain as the nose on my face. In other countries, it is the big bankers and millionaires. With us, it is the laboring man, as Marx foretold in the Communist Manifesto. The working class is using its power to usher in classless society. Like Fyodor, Jack, Sonia, and Varnon, the communists by their works at the machine and the union in cultural activities and community life have one general recognition as the vanguard of their class. To them, the 11,000s look for leadership in all phases of their lives. As Fiedler puts it, it is up to the party to map out the way ahead, take the lead in overcoming difficulties, work out general policies, bring them to the mass of workers to be considered and acted upon. It is a job to see that each man and woman understands the political significance of his task, entrusting him with class consciousness and desire to give and achieve his best. Ivan, me, a non-party man, sums it up.
You're a non-party
Communists
man?
ate humans like the rest of us. Only you can count on them to see further and sweat more than the ordinary fellow. We drop in and out of the Red Triangle's daily meetings. They are held in the director's office quarters, of which the workers' administration fell heir when they took over the plant from Singer. Spacious, handsomely furnished room. Its walls are covered with charts, while numerous sewing machine models are mounted on racks and shine forth from the windowsill. I'm going to skip down a little bit here because there's one part where they start talking about moving workers around, and I actually think is pretty interesting.
Sonia
Here we
brings
go.
them tea and cookies. I saw that.
So hearing, I'll read from here. On the table are glasses of tea, sugar, bread, and sausage. It is already 6 o'clock. The day shift has gone long, but the triangle is hard at it, catching a bite in between times. They harsh over problems arising from their work and agree on what is to be done. Since each is busy all day from 7 on with a special task, this is the best hour they find to get together. Barnon asks his comrade, what would you think of transferring 5 skilled workers into number 31's department? Several workers and also the foreman proposed it. When I was there today, they liked 1 or 2 good party members among them to pep them up. An excellent idea, Clemenson says. Which men would be willing to tackle it and what departments can best spare them? After this is settled, Sergeyev remarks, now about the new nursery, and so it goes. When the triangle adjourns, the town dock is striking 9 bells, swinging across the snow, and 3 men turn to look back at the plant, which rises like giant cliffs into the blue night. Our factory, their eyes say. Ours, the 11,000, the 171, Jesus Christ, the 160 millions. All right, I did a lot of yapping. But basically my point, why I read all that stuff is because, again, it seems rather boring, right? But these are people who were discussing real material things. And like how the someone had brought up in the last one, actually, and I unfortunately skipped. I actually skipped it. Now I think about it. But in the last page, there's a woman talking about more in depth the need for more childcare to happen at at the expense of the factory, and it's then later on during this triangle discussion that the actual leadership of this factory is addressing this and goes on to actually presumably to make changes, in regard to that, in order to keep the workers happy, in order to keep the work going, in order to give these people a higher quality of life. So work isn't just something that you have to, dread going to. How many people do we know in society? In every job I've worked, there are always mothers. There are always single moms, struggling moms. And one of the main things they talk about is I can't pick, I can't get extra shifts, or I can't do overtime, or I can't work this day because I have childcare. Childcare. Even in communist circles and communist parties, we were just talking about this. Like, a lot of times people, really smart, intelligent people who have a lot to bring to the movement, can't do these things because they have children, and you cannot reasonably ask them to abandon their children, for the cause.
Hey, the cause needs you. The revolution needs you. Tell that kid, go watch some TV. Leave him at home. It's fine. Don't
latch door kid or latchkey kid,
right?
We can just go back to that. It's fine.
It reminds me of when we got into that argument with that guy about when he called Ash a breeder. And he was saying that, mothers aren't proletariat. And it's like, well, they are. You are just, in support of a society that doesn't recognize that. But not to harp on that guy because that was a long time ago. But like, that's how capitalists are now. Capitalists don't care if you have childcare. And I understand some places will have a nursery or whatever, but what were you going to say, Nico?
I'm going to say this is actually directly tied to the foundation of capitalism, like how it started. It was purposely made to where women became defined in a very specific way. their labor was supposed to be unpaid because they were more focused on making sure that women could have more children, more laborers.
Yep.
So
Workers for the future.
devalue the woman's work so that the father can go work and then the children that are born can go work.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I mentioned it earlier before the podcast. Why I always bring up Caliban and the Witch, because it goes into deep discussion about that transition from feudalism, where women didn't have this specific role of child rearing, and how it was more communal in a very real way, like all families took care of all families, and how it became very individualized, isolating for the woman when that transition into capitalism happened. And even still today, the idea that women are asking for nurseries is too much, because what do you mean that's not work to the capitalists?
Right.
Because you're not providing me any type of resource except for that future kid you're going to have, but I don't have to worry about that future kid until they can work.
There are 3 things that I can think of immediately in regards to that. One, there was recently some capitalist, I can't remember exactly who. It could have been Elon that said it, but it could also have been someone else, where they effectively were like, they were talking about one of the things that's really only a problem in capitalist countries, which is a declining population, which we were seeing in like South Korea, Japan, this country, and in bits of Europe, because the reserve labor pool is diminishing. Under socialism, everyone's working for each other, with each other, so it doesn't really matter. Things plateau, right? That's just how populations work in not only human society, but animal society. That's nature. But they were effectively like, we need more of the working class to have children so that my children have workers for their factories. And that was essentially what they said. And then I think about recently in Florida, and I want to say Michigan, they're talking about relaxing child labor laws to kind of fill some of these jobs. So if you lower and get rid of the child labor laws, people having kids, the kids get to work faster. It's like just they're going to try to get you to keep pumping them out, right?
Yeah,
have more kids, so we have more workers.
It's also why women's bodily autonomy has been being attacked. It terrifies the capitalists that there might be the reality that the woman laborer does not want to have children.
Yeah, and that's terrifying if you are a capitalist. And the third piece I can think of is in a previous life where I was married with children. A very real discussion we had at one point was my wife, we were talking about her getting a job, and we were looking at the pay scale at what she was qualified for and the jobs that were around us and what she could get.
Right.
And mathematically, we would look at the week, and then we look at the cost of daycare and childcare. And her weekly wage would be going to the daycare.
Right.
So it's like it did not make mathematical sense for her to work and not stay home with the kids, which then put it all of it on me.
Yeah, but not only does it put it all on you, but it also reinforces this dynamic that capitalists, that white supremacists, people who believe in the patriarchy want to instill, which is that the woman stays home.
Yeah, it mathematically enforced it.
Yep, exactly.
And we were both hyper aware of what was happening. We're like, we would joke. It's like we are kind of accidentally living that 50s traditional lifestyle.
Right. Absolutely.
Not by choice.
Not by
that's
choice.
what was happening.
Yeah.
So you sent me. Oh, go ahead, Nico.
Oh no, I was just agreeing.
Yeah. You sent me this, Cruz. Average number of weekly hours works in the agriculture and non-agriculture industries in the United States and the Soviet Union in select years between 1970 and 1980.
So I thought this was just kind of an interesting little chart that I had found when I was kind of researching a little bit with work. And it's just showing like people worked in general less
Mm-hmm.
under socialist conditions. So the
Yeah.
red and the light red, so that's and the blues are the United
Mm-hmm.
States. And it's sort of essentially like people more got done in terms of productive quality
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
in less time.
Absolutely, and that actually is a super good segue into this other thing I wanted to show from Soviet Life magazine, which was a magazine, English magazine, in the Soviet embassy in Washington for people to peruse. In this particular page here, I'm not sure how well it's going to translate onto the actual YouTube video. Let me see if I zoom in a little bit. This helps. And it kind of does. Okay. So this is from Soviet magazine where USSR USA rate of growth. The Soviet Union produces 20% of the world's industrial output today, but only 60 years ago, Russia accounted for less than 3% of everything produced on our planet. In 1913's Russia's industrial output was 12.5% of the US's in 1975. The USSR was more than 80% of the US's. In the last 25 years, the average annual rate of growth of the national income was 8.1% for the USSR and 3.2% for the US, while industrial output advanced at a rate of 9.6% and 3.8%, respectively. Whenever we compare growth rates, someone is sure to point out that at a lower level, it is easier to build up to percentage. To a certain degree, this is true. This is why I propose to take in absolute ratios. Here, it is difficult to raise objections. In the past 60 years, U.S. industry has been developing at a much higher rate than ever before. Despite this, the USSR has been steadily catching up with it, and in a number of vital products, the USSR has long been leading the world. What are the prospects? The absolute size of each percent in the USSR is increasing with every year that passes. Naturally, you cannot expect it to show the rate of growth characteristics of the 30s and 40s, but this isn't the point. What we are trying to figure out is whether the Soviet Union will continue to develop at a higher rate than the US in the foreseeable future, as it has done so far. The basic data shows that both the Soviet Union and the United States have a sufficient supply of raw material and enough skilled labor and powerful production facilities. Why do I think, and not only I, that the Soviet Union will continue to make a more rapid progression? Till recently, it was impossible for the Soviet economy to support the comprehensive and simultaneously development of all sectors, and this incurred serious losses. For example, sowing and harvesting operations were nearly 100% mechanized, but drying, cleaning, storing, and transporting grain called for considerable labor output. Lack of storage space and elevators, as well as cold storage and specialized transport facilities, often caused greater losses of products than in the U.S. Repairs, construction, office work, and everyday services had consumed and continued to consume larger quantities of social labor than the United States, while making more rapid progress directly at the point of production. We lose in the sphere of infrastructure and rear service bodies. Now that we have, for the most part, appeased our hunger for the main industries, we have been focusing our attention more and more on patching up the holes through which the resources of our society are leaking. For example, if we allocate 1 million rubles for the elimination of disproportions between separate adjacent areas of production, the return is far greater than the expenditure because we make the whole system work. Another factor is our favor in public ownership of the means of production and economic development. Along planned lines, accommodation makes it impossible to concentrate colossal resources in decisive sectors for short periods of time. Still, another factor is more efficient use of advantages offered by the economic laws of socialism and improvement of the economic management mechanisms. It should not be overlooked that we are pioneers blazing untrodden trails. No one before us has developed a socialist economy. We have been gradually finding the possibilities inherent in planning, prices, incentives, and responsibilities. We have discovered many things and incorporated them into our work, but life is constantly confronting us with new problems that call for new solutions, and these solutions have been producing an ever greater effect. This we can add the total absence of class antagonisms, the contradictions between the worker and the entrepreneur, and the absence of unemployment and inflation. Our socialist economy has been developing steadily and working without any crisis. This, of course, makes us feel very optimistic about the future. Now, I really like the part here where he's talking about the size of the percentage, right? Because for each percentage point that the Soviet Union was able to catch up towards the United States, there's already so many more millions of people involved in that process, from a essentially feudal society to now an industrial powerhouse. So when you're showing that chart of hours worked less crews, that's even more impressive.
Yeah. Less time, more productive, and there's just a plan, right? It's like, this is what we're going to do. And everyone's working together to do it. And there was a line in there where it said something about crises, right? The USSR had done it without crisis. And what they mean there is that boom bust cycle that capitalism has. So line go up, then line go down, line go up. So that growth that the United States is experiencing is not consistent. Constant recessions, ebbs and flow. Whereas the Soviet Union is just kind of doing this. Maybe it plateaus a little bit, but it's consistently going up. Right? It's kind of doing that as opposed. So the people are not suffering in the time. And that particular chart showed 70s and 80s. There's only one period outside of, there's two periods, I should say, where hours exceeded 40 in the USSR. And the two periods were when it first started, and they're building it, and right after World War II. Because they're rebuilding the country. So everyone's got to work a bit more. But even in those time periods, I don't have the chart pulled up anymore for the previous ones, but even in those time periods, it never exceeded 50 hours a week. Whereas you could imagine in, say, the United States, they'd be like, oh, you need to pull 60, 70-hour weeks.
Yeah.
In order for us
we have people today who regularly work 60 hours. Like, for example, my fiance. My fiance, for when I first started dating, regularly worked around 60 to 65 hours a week.
Yeah. I mean, that's me now. And I've done that for 2 years straight, and I'm actually like not doing that anymore. I'm making arrangements to change my job situation because it's unattainable and it's not worth it. It's not worth your physical health or your mental health or anything. That's why I haven't been around.
It's like I currently work probably between 60 and 70 hours a week between my two jobs. One other thing, none of these charts bring up, but I'm thinking about it right now, is everyone's working like under 40 hours a week. Almost none of them probably had two jobs.
No.
Yep.
The society provided the majority of stuff, and they just got away with the one job.
There's another statistic I saw on the Soviet archive that was talking about how factory workers' average work per day was 7 hours, and I'm like, interesting. That's very interesting.
And I mean, we can just compare it to like the modern day. We're working more hours. We see that everything has more ability to be produced quicker without as much work, as much labor involved. But yet we don't have anything. We're still struggling to make rent, even though most of us work two jobs and work over 60 hours. Socialism shows us that in all spheres, things get better as long as the worker can own the means of production.
So stop being a simp. Oh, go ahead.
Stop being a simp for capitalism. Stop going on TikTok and bragging about how you work 100 hours a week.
You're dying.
Right?
You're dying.
You are being exploited. Like, I made 100. I remember a video a long time ago where the guy's like, I made 100K last year, and I work 80 to 100 hours a week. What are you doing? And it's like someone did the math. It's like, dude, you're making like $13 an hour.
Yeah, fuck that.
Because when you spread that, you're being overexploited for what I think they worked on an oil rig.
Yeah,
if I remember correctly. But so like, what is work, right? What is work under capitalism? What is work under socialism? Under capitalism, it is the only way you can potentially survive and make someone else profit. Under socialism, it is what you can do for each other.
Exactly. So stop being a simp for your boss and Elon Musk, because things only get better, work only gets better, life only gets better under socialism.
And you got more time. You can watch more podcasts.
You do.
You can do Twitch, and you don't have to sit there and like, oh, if this Twitch stream doesn't hit 1 million followers, I'm not going to be able to pay my rent. Like, you just do the Twitch stream.
Right.
It probably won't be called Twitch. It'll be called something else.
Mm.
Publicly owned.
Not to like do like an anecdote or personal experience, but I think one thing that's always going to, when I think about the concept of watching someone who worked all their life, I think about my mom. My mom was a diehard capitalist simp. She was a conservative. She was, Christian. She thought that if she spent her life working, which she did, she basically helped raise her siblings. She worked at a pizza shop where her family owned, or my grandparents owned when she was like 11 to like 17. Basically worked until the last 2 years of her life. And she retired. She got $1,300 a month in Social Security. And 2 years later, she died living in a roach infested trailer. Yeah. And that's what she got. That's what capitalism gave her.
Yeah.
Yep. And some ignorant ass person is going to come in and say, well, they didn't work hard enough. But I mean, based off your eyewitness, they sure did. And even if they didn't, no one deserves that.
No one deserves it.
That anecdote made me think of another video I had seen. And this was also a while ago. And it was someone had a carpet company or like a flooring company or something like that. Like that was what they specialized in for remodels. And they were showing a video of one of the people that was there, one of the workers. I can't remember if he was like an owner or just a long-time worker. But he's on the ground. He's sitting up against the wall and he just looks exhausted. Yeah. And they're like, this man is such a hard worker and more of you need to be like him. He was 98.
Oh, no.
And he looked tired. And thankfully, all the comments were like, let that man go home. Let him rest. Just pay him. Just give him the money. And tell him not to show up. No one should be working that long.
Yeah, that's bananas. That reminds me of my own anecdotal. I remember when I used to work in the group home and stuff, I took one of the clients to Burger King, and the lady at the cashier, she had to be like 75. And I'm like, what the hell are you doing here? Like, get out of here. Go home.
Go do something.
Right, but people
go paint.
Their Social Security, their pension, their retirement doesn't cover it because capitalism doesn't care about you, and they don't care about the work that you do as long as you're just making the money.
And now with the stock market crashes and how all that's trending, people's 401ks and retirement plans are being completely wiped out.
Yep.
Even people that are effectively, quote unquote, doing everything right, like Nico said, are getting screwed over and left to die. And that's because that's what you are to capitalism, a number. And once you're no longer working, you're no longer useful.
Exactly.
Yep. Fall of the empire can't come soon enough, my friends.
Just make it happen. Just give it a little push.
All right. I think this was a good one for getting back on the saddle. What did you say?
I think so.
All right. Well, we'll yap with you guys later.
Bye-bye.